coming out of retirement for this. For those of you who don't know me, nice to meet you. I go by Joni and I am an artist specializing in oil portraiture, but I also work with makeup. And today's topic of conversation is this foundation shade. Is this even usable? And before we start talking about the practicality of this product, let's start off simple with what is melanin? Melanin is what gives our eyes, hair, skin, color. Everybody has it to different degrees. When you see characteristics like my dark eyes or my dark hair, it is associated with having more melanin as opposed to somebody with, say, blonde hair and blue eyes. There's many types of melanin found in humans, but specifically for our eyes, hair, and skin color, it is determined by the presence of eumelanin and pheomelanin. Eumelanin is responsible for dark colors like my eye color and my hair color. The pinkness of my lips, that's due to pheomelanin. So even though from afar my irises and my hair color may look pure black, it isn't. And if you have black hair like me, you know exactly what I mean when I say standing in direct sunlight actually shows the true hue of the color. Our skin color works in the same way in that paler people have less eumelanin in their skin, so therefore they have less pigment. When most people think of black things like black paint or black objects, we often think of the absence of color, but this is not at all how skin, hair, and eye pigment works. Like a person who has a very deep dark complexion is not because they lack pigment, it's because they have an abundance of it. Purely jet black people like this foundation do not exist in real life. When strong light sources like the sun hit deep complexions, they still reflect brown orange hues. That's also why when artists paint, we typically don't like mixing with black straight from the tube for our palette because it muddies a color very quickly. And just because something looks black to our eyes doesn't mean that it is black. Like jet black. Black is also an extremely strong pigment, which means it lowers the chroma of your color mixes too rapidly, and therefore you end up with these lifeless colors that are muddy. And I'm saying all this to show you exactly why this color still makes absolutely zero sense as a real foundation shade. This is Youthforia's darkest shade of foundation. It's not listed on their website as being anything other than a foundation, not a mixing pigment, not a contour, a foundation, a jet black foundation. After people tested out their initial foundation release, they asked them to extend the shade range, and this is what Youthforia came back with, claiming that it is a neutral undertone. Undertones in foundation implies that there's a stronger underlying pigment apart from the orange base. Orange being the hue family that normal human skin tones range in. I swatched 3 of the darkest foundation shades from 3 different brands. All have been shown to work on people with deeper complexions. And on my pinky finger, I swatched Youthforia's darkest shade. See how the first 3 actually have an undertone? What is this? Adding pure white does lower the overall chroma of the color, but you'll get the gist. Even after adding white pigment and lowering the chroma that much, these 3 shades still have some sort of undertone. This one, absolutely not. That's gray. This shade does not have a workable undertone because it did not have a base shade at all. That's because this foundation only contains one pigment, black oxide. My favorite cosmetic chemist, Javon Ford, actually speaks more about this on his page. I highly suggest you check out his videos. Like, you cannot tell me that that foundation shade is meant to be wearable on its own, because it's not. You also cannot convince me that this is supposed to be a foundation mixer, because when you mix black and yellowish or orange hues, you get like a really weird, gross looking green. Not a normal olive green undertone, like straight up olive green. Nobody is that color. That is a booger. That is mucus. A while ago, Rem Beauty released these mixing shades, and clearly on their website it says that it is meant to alter contour or highlight. But on Youthforia's website, there's no information about it being a mixing shade. It quite literally just says foundation. Like it was never meant to be a mixing shade. Actually, the brand publicly documented that they made the foundation shade before they even had a person to match it to. So eventually, they pulled 2 random men off the street and said that it matched their foundation shades. But guess what? The darkest shade was still too dark for him, and the only reason that it looked like it worked on camera was because they sheared it out so much that you could barely see the products anymore. So please, somebody explain to me why they were blindly creating and releasing products for a skin tone they weren't even sure existed. They actually had so many examples online for them to use as a reference point. They knew that they needed to make darker shades and also more undertones, and yet they ignored it. This is their darkest shade, and this is their second to darkest shade. I don't think a single attempt was made to include as many undertones as they had with their lighter shades for the darker ones. Because what is this? Going from this shade of brown to straight up pitch black? You're actually crazy. And it's so disappointing to see because I was really supportive of their initial shade launch until I found out that they were shade baiting. And even then, when people gave them a second chance to right their wrongs, they still messed up. At this point, I think they should just trash the brand as a whole. I can't believe I have to say this in the year 2024, but just in case anybody else is still confused, black people aren't literally black in color, the same way white people aren't computer paper white. Please stop making excuses for brands that don't try, don't care, and refuse to take accountability. Use your brain.